Hi, this is Chris from Untangled Pearls, and today's video is about how to make a buttonhole. We have this delightful one skein pattern coming out with these adorable buttons, and it's a very simple pattern, but some people haven't made a buttonhole before. I'm going to show you how simple it is and get you ready. This is a 2-stitch buttonhole, and that's how we're going to do it in this class, in this video. So the pattern will say knit 8, then I'll say do a buttonhole. If you read the instructions, oops, let me grab my working yarn, there we go. It'll say slip 2 stitches straight over from your left hand needle onto your right hand needle. And just like when we're binding off, we're going to pick that first stitch up and take it off the needle. There's 1 stitch bound off. We're going to slide another stitch over. And now we're going to bind off the 2nd stitch. So we have bound off the 2 stitches we need for the buttonhole. I am now going to slide that stitch back over to the left hand needle. Here's my little bind off section. So now I'm going to replace those 2 stitches I bound off with a backwards loop cast on. There's 1, there's 2. I have now casted on those 2 stitches back on that I took off down below, and now I can knit across, and that completed. So now I'm going to knit 8 more. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm ready to do my buttonhole again. I'm going to slide 2 stitches over from my left hand needle to my right hand needle, slipping them over purlwise, not to rotate them. Pick up the first stitch, drop it over the 2nd stitch, just like we were binding off to finish a pattern. Slide a 3rd stitch over and bind off the 2nd stitch. Put the 3rd stitch back onto the left hand needle. Now we're going to pick up our working yarn. We're going to do a backwards loop, cast on 2 stitches, 1, 2, and now we're going to continue to knit. This is the one, so now we're going to knit 1, okay? So we created this hole, and it's 2 stitches wide. For this pattern and this yarn and the size needle, it works beautifully for these buttons. And now you're just going to continue on as the pattern says, which is to knit. And you're just going to knit this side, turn it over, and knit your way back. The buttonholes are now complete. You'll just have a couple more rows of garter stitch in this pattern in particular. The buttonholes are made the same. It's just a matter of how many stitches you do based off of the size of the buttonholes and the size of the needles that you're using. In this case, we're using a little chunkier yarn, so a 2 stitches is plenty for this size button, which is about a 1-inch button. Here I am. I can see it right here is where the buttonhole is, and it's a little tight, but that's good. Okay, there it is. You can see that's where we put those stitches back on that we took off right above it. And we got it done. And we knitted right over that buttonhole. And then I'm going to knit across, and I will hit the 2nd buttonhole. Oops, split yarn. My cat's trying to come up with me. Shoe down. She wants to be in the picture. And I come across. And I'll feel it when I start my buttonhole. Here's my buttonhole, see, there we go. So here's 1 cast on, see. Split, and split, don't want to split. It's funny when you're doing it through the camera, you're not doing it that you're seeing. You lose one perspective. You don't have the 4-dimensional, you have a 3-dimensional look-see. There you go. And now I'm going to knit across. So now the buttonholes are complete. So a buttonhole is very, very simple. Take your time. And you can, when you're trying to make it for other buttons or other yarns, just do a practice run to know how many stitches you need to bind off for your particular button. But you can see right there, there's the buttonhole right there. It's going to fit the button really nicely. Here's the other one right here. Now, quick little tidbit about buttons, okay? About this cowl, okay? It's designed where you can wear it like this, where it's straight. You can also do a little bit of a, angle on it if you wanted to. Or if you wanted to sew the buttons along the sides, you could do it like this. There's a couple different ways. Now, sewing the buttons on. Usually I recommend one of two things, either using the yarn as your thread to sew the buttons on, because if you use real thin thread, regular sewing thread, it can cut through the yarn. Or in this case, the yarn buttonholes were kind of thin and this is a chunky yarn, so we did use thread. But in return, we put a secondary button on the behind here, which is really nice because it clamps the material between the two buttons. I can use regular thread. It disperses any weight and it makes pulling the button off virtually almost impossible. So when you're sewing onto your knitting, it doesn't hurt, and especially if you want to use regular thread, it doesn't hurt to put a little backing. Some people use a little piece of fabric. I like the fact of having a little button. You can use it any size, it's just sitting back there. So happy knitting. Hope you enjoyed the video. Bye.